I'm Renzo. Renzo Tan from. Oh, start. Okay, there. Starting the record. So, hello, I'm Renzo Tan from MISA, e-services cluster. I'm currently the AVP for IT skills training. So, I'm the guy in charge of the workshops and all. So, today we'll be having like an HTML CSS workshop, and this is purely like beginner workshop. Like if you're like advanced now, medyo sa HTML and CSS, this might be more like a refresher for you. But in the case where you still want to learn more advanced things, I'll be tackling like things like CSS grid and animations naman at the very end. So uh, don't be afraid to like stay in these workshops because there's still stuff in store for you naman. So yeah. So again, welcome to the HTML and CSS workshop brought to you by MISA Services. So this is going to be the outline for our workshop. First, we're going to discuss how the web works. Then the HTML boilerplate, like what HTML gives you out of the box and what you can do with it. Then we'll also discuss the common HTML tags like headings, paragraphs, bold, italicized, etc., etc. Basically, the stuff that will get you up and running with HTML and CSS, and also semantic HTML. Since, as you know, there's a lot of versions of HTML out there, but we're gonna be using the latest version of HTML, which is HTML5, and it will include like a lot of semantic HTML, which you will need to learn eventually for like professional use, because that's the kind of standard for it. And the second part, we're also going to be discussing CSS, so like the syntax, selector specificity, colors, on all these advanced stuff, especially for Flexbox, grid, media queries. You'll be needing that for responsive design and also transitions and animations for those who are interested with all the movements and all the dynamic, flexible stuff going on around CSS. So one thing to note is you don't need to memorize everything because if you think about it, HTML and CSS is a really big area of web development. There's a lot of things going on. Personally, when I tackled HTML and CSS, it took me around half a year. So HTML, CSS, and it's kind of easy to get started with, but the more you dive deeper into like layouting, animations, transitions, and even moving on to like JavaScript frameworks, it's gonna get really hectic at some point. So since it's your first time, for most of you at least, first time learning HTML and CSS, don't be like afraid, don't be intimidated by all the syntax, by all the code, because at the end of the day, professional developers still search in Google for help. So again, I will be tackling a lot of code, a lot of syntax, a lot of things to memorize, but not necessarily like how to memorize it, but a lot of things to know. um Everything is one search away, so don't be intimidated by the amount of info naman. So for now, what we'll do is we're gonna start to create our own first HTML file. So for the desktop, we're just gonna put our file on the desktop na lang for easy access. Let's create a folder. Let's name it HTML CSS workshop. You can name it whatever you want, doesn't really matter. Then we're gonna open it na lang sa VS Code. So desktop and workshop here. So hopefully you guys are in this part of the screen where you just opened your folder in VS Code. So again, as I stated in the prerequisites, you need to have live server installed. So if you search live server in the extensions, you should have this installed. So hopefully most of you have it installed already. And we can start with getting our first HTML file. Actually, let's create a folder here. Let's name it HTML, so that you guys can have like a structure for you guys to check out at the end of this workshop where everything's going, like the flow of the workshop in general. So let's create a file here. Let's name it index.html. So whenever you make HTML files, you have to end it with .html so that the browser or like so that VS Code will know that it's an HTML file. And then when you create your HTML file, there's a boilerplate for it. But the good thing with VS Code is you can actually have it like placed there like very quick. So what you can do is you can do an exclamation point and press enter. So your boilerplate is now here. So here you have exclamation point doc type. That kind of means like, okay, this is an HTML file and we want it to be in HTML5. And here we have the head tag, which kind of stores our meta tags. So what are meta tags? Meta tags are more of like information about your document. So, for example, what's the title of the document? What's the description? So this is good for search engines. Like if you search your website in the search engines, it's gonna pop out there with a title, description, mga tags, related words. So this is where you actually put it. Then here you see the title tab. That's where you put the title of your document. So when you press, if you go to a website in the tab, like when you press new tab, there's like a title there. That's where you'll see the title, which I'll show you later on. Then for the body, this is where you put the content of your document. So this is where we start typing our HTML code and our content basically on what's going to include, what's part of our HTML file. So mm, we're going to go to, first, we want to understand how the web works. So when you type in a URL in the web, you just what you expect is like the website, diba? Kasi that's what the user sees. But behind the scenes, when you type a URL in the browser, what's the protocol that's happening there is called an HTTP protocol. It's basically a set of rules or instructions on how the browser will get pages or how the browser will get data information from the server. So for here, so the browser types in a URL. For example, I got this source from Academide. It's a really good source for learning web development. But other than that, so when the browser enters the URL, it will send a request to the DNS server. So what's the DNS server? Kasi when you type your URL in the website, like www.google.com, the browser doesn't understand it. Like behind the scenes, they don't understand what that is. So what the browser does is gets that domain and translates it into like numbers. So it's called an IP address. And every server has a unique IP address. So think about it as home address. Like one person lives in a different city, one person lives in a different street. Everyone has their own unique address. So when you send a request to that server, it already knows based on the IP address where to go. So it will send that request to the DNS server and translate it to IP address. Then, from that request, it's going to go to the server, and then the server will give back the response. So it will give you the HTML files, the CSS files, all the data, the backend stuff, so that it will give you the website. So that's basically in a gist how the web works. So HTML syntax is basically using brackets. Wait, not brackets. Greater and equal, less than and greater than signs. So kind of like that. And it will have the name. It's called the opening tag, and some elements also have attributes in them. Then with inside those tags, so the name and the closing, the opening and closing tag, you put the content inside, which is optional. Some tags don't really necessarily have content inside them. Like for example, an image tag doesn't really need to have a content in them because it's a self-closing tag anyway. So yeah. So here are our common HTML tags versus the heading tags, paragraph tags, and bold and italicized. So for heading tags, you use H1, H2 until H6, H1 being the biggest, H6 being the smallest. Paragraphs, they're basically just one type. Unlike headings, there's many types, but in paragraph, there's only one, which is the P tag. And bold and italicized is using strong and emphasis tags. So I'll give you an example. So go to your VS Code. Let me just organize this. For example, if you want to type a heading tag, you can use H1. So this is going to be heading 1. You can also type H2, heading 2, H3, heading 3. And this will go on until heading 6, so H6. So what do you use headings for? You use headings for when you have an article and you want to put like a title, like if you want to put something you want to emphasize on, like a title or like the starting text or something like that. So that's what you use headings for. So if you we already installed live server, so what you can do is you can right click and open live server. I'm using Mac. It will say here open live server, but it should also show in Windows. So if you open live server, you can see that there's already heading tags there: heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and heading 6. Next, we'll be discussing paragraph tags. So what are paragraph tags? Paragraph tags are basically the content of your, for example, an article. You'll be using like small text for that. So what we'll be using is a paragraph tag. So paragraph tags, for example, you want to type, hello, world, I am from MISA. If we do that, and we can just check our live server, it's already responsive. We don't need to refresh it anymore. You can see here, hello world, I'm from MISA. So that will pop out text content of basically a paragraph for it. And one thing to note is if you put spaces here, extra spaces, like for example, I space M from MISA, it's not gonna take effect because the browser knows if there's extra spaces or extra breakpoints. So for example, like you do a line break like that, it's not gonna notice it. The browser will still think, okay, it's gonna fix it by itself basically. It will be like, okay, there's a lot of spaces, there's a lot of line breaks. I'm gonna fix this and put it back all together. So that's what the browser does. Next is bold and italicized. So for example, um, we want to make a description, a website about ourselves. So we can remove these heading tags, and you can put here, hi, oops, hi, I am your name. You can put your name here, and then you're gonna put the paragraph below it. So, hello world, I'm from MISA. I am from BSMIS. There. So, for example, we want to make like a site about ourselves. We have a heading tag, and then we have a paragraph tag. What if we want to emphasize I am from BSMIS? Para we want to like make yabang no, oh, MIS is the best. So, parang ganun. So, we can do a strong tag. And what a strong tag does is it kind of bolds your text. And you just put a surrounding open and closing tag of strong. So if you see, it's gonna bold the text. Now, what if you want to italicize something? Like for example, MISA, that's not part of the dictionary. I want to italicize that. So what we can do is EM, which means emphasis. And if you put it surrounding, it's gonna do the italics. See? It's gonna do it. And one thing to note is you can also combine strong and emphasis tag. So if I can also put an emphasis tag here surrounding the strong, and it will also work. And as you can see, it also works. It bolds and italicizes it at the same time. So that's something to note about. You can also combine styles. Next, we can put links as well. So to put a link, uh, you use the A tag. And the A tag, what it has is first an href that will store the URL, then a closing A tag. So for example, here I have href, http, www.google.com. Then you put the content of whatever you want to show, like Google. So you can try that. You can put http / www.google.com. And if I put the content here, which is Google, it's gonna show here Google. And if I click on that, it's gonna direct me to Google. So this is good for social media links. This is also good for like switching between pages. Now, it's also important to know that if you're going to put an external link in the A tag, you should put http ://. What happens ba if I put only www.google.com? Let's see. It's going to look at my current computer and look for a file name www.google.com, which is not what we want. We want it to go to the website. That's why we put http. Sorry. Now we can also switch between pages using the A tag. If I make a new file called about.html, then do the typical boilerplate again, and let's say h1 about page. Then in the href, we're gonna put about.html. If we go back to opening index.html in live server, so we can refresh it. Then you can see Google here, but don't mind it. Let's actually change it to about page. Now we're in the about page. If we click on it, we get moved to the about page. So this is good for like switching pages within our HTML file. Now, so as you learn, you can use external links or you can also use local links. For images naman, you use the img tag. So we have a source. You put the URL. It can similar with link tags. You can also have a local image, or you can get an image from the net. So by doing that, let's go to our image.html. Let's put img here. Then I don't know. Let's get some. Um, let's search face in Google and just get some random image. Let's get this guy. He looks foggy. So if we just get him, load load faster. There. If I just save him and put it in my HTML workshop HTML folder, it's here. So we want to rename it to, for example, face. Now, to put the image, you just put it in the source attribute. So face.jpg. In the alt attributes, you're gonna put what you're gonna put there if the file does not exist or it cannot find it. So let's just put face. And if you go to the document, it pops out. What's an alternative to this? What you can do is you can right click, then copy image address. It's gonna copy the address of the image, then paste it to the source. The same thing will happen kasi we got the image address. But this will, please note that if you're gonna do an external link, you need to have your Wi-Fi on because if you don't have your Wi-Fi on, how will it search it? No. So that's also something to note. Since we don't want it to be too long, we're just gonna put face.jpg. And yeah, oh, sorry, I'm getting really dehydrated. Um, Next we'll be having tables as well. So for example, in the index.html, we want to put a table. So for us to put a table, we can put table. There you go. And as you can see, let me organize this. In the table code, we have a table row, tr, and in each line after that, we have headings. So first name, last name, and age. Then below that, we have another table row. This time, we have the table data. So Jill, Smith, and 50. Let's test this out. So for example, we want to make a table row. So we put tr, then we put th. Let's say we want to put the name of our friend. So our friend's name, then his age, another th, age, then another th, his hobbies. Hobby na lang para one item. Then we put another table row because we want to make another row for the table. And then this time we're going to put the data. So we're going to put the friend's name, which is the first column. So let's name him John Doe. John Doe. Then table data, which is, for example, we want to have it at, let's say 20. Then hobby is, let's say, basketball. And if you look at our, what's this space? Get out. Okay, there. Table. You can see there, we have our table. Now, what if we want to have lines there? It looks so pangit. What we can do is, let's create a style tag here. We're gonna discuss CSS later, so don't worry if you don't understand this for now. We're gonna put table, then table row, and table headers. Actually, that's, yeah, table headers and table data. And surround them in curly brackets. And then we're gonna put border 1 pixel solid black. Again, it's okay if you don't understand this for now. I'm just showing to you that it's possible to create lines for these tables. And as you can see, we have our lines there. And if you want to create a new row, you just put another tr here and put the td, not th, sorry, td. Let's name him Jane. Name her Jane Doe. Let's say 19, and let's say golf, and it's gonna pop out there. So that's how you create tables. So this is our website so far. Looks beautiful. There's I am your name, uh, your description, your about page, and the name of your friends. So you can publish this online if you want to. So other than that, we also have unordered and ordered lists. So for example, after the table, you want to have a list of like your to-do list, for example. you can do an unordered list, so UL, and then let's separate this part. You guys won't get confused. So here you have your UL. That's where you put your list, and you put LI for a section of that, for an instance of that list. So let's say we want to cook the dishes. Then another LI here, wash laundry. And then we want to um, feed our dog. So what's going to happen here? It's going to create an unordered list because we use UL, which means unordered list. And if we go here, you can see it uses bullet points. So cook dishes, wash laundry, and feed the dog. What if you wanted to have numberings, like an order to it? We can just replace this with, let's just copy paste this, and put OL. That will give us an unordered list. So that's it for list. So as we already discussed headings, paragraphs, links, tables, and lists. Now we want to understand input tags. This is good for like mga sign up forms, mga registration forms, like order forms. So for us to make a form, let's create. Let's say we want to make a contact form. Let's go to our about page. About.html. Let's create a form here. Let's put form. And here in the form, we have an action and a method. So action and method, this is really gonna be more for backend stuff. So if you're using Django or like Express or like PHP, this is where this is necessary. But for now, let's say let's not put it in first because we can't really showcase what this does without having a backend. So let's just put form for now, form muna, because we want to focus on HTML. Then we want to put an input type. Let's say we want to put a text field input, and the default is text. Then if you open the live server for the about page, you can see it creates an input text here. Now what if we want to have a label there? Let's put label. Then for let's say we want to have a name. Now for to connect the label here to the input, we need to specify an ID in this input. So let's say ID is name. Then the for here has to be the same as the ID here, so that we know that this label is connected with this input. So as you can see, if I refresh here, oh, I forgot to put something here. Let's put name inside the label tags. And as you can see, there's name there. Name, and if I click on the name, it's gonna highlight on the input text. So it knows that it's connected. So now we can also put like input is password. This is for password inputs. And we're gonna put label for password. Oh, I forgot to put password again. Password. And I forgot to put the ID. ID is password. And as you can see, it's we have a name input and we have a password input. What if we want to have like a separate, what if we want to break it so that the password goes to the bottom? We can add a break tag, which is a BR. Yeah, there you go. Then it will break it. But you won't be using BR a lot because when you get to CSS, you'll be able to customize this more efficiently. So that's just to show you that the BR tag exists also. Now, we also have an input type of submit. So if you want to have a button for submitting, you can put input submit. And if you can see, there's a submit button there. And of course, when you type your name here, password, and you press submit, nothing happens because we don't have a backend. We're doing pure HTML in this project first. Now you know how to use format inputs. Now, what's the difference with name and ID? ID here, that's for connecting with the label. The name naman of the input is more for backend. So when you submit something, it's gonna say that whatever values in this name, it's going to be equal to the value you place in that input. So name equals Renzo, password equals 12345, something like that. So it's going to pass that in the backend. But the ID is mainly for labeling purposes only. So that's how it works. So there are also other common input tags. There's also text, email, password, color, number, checkbox, and radio. Since we don't have much time, I won't be discussing all of that, but you can search that in your own. And there's a lot of resources out there that you can look at. So if you need a text field, if you need an email field, if you need a password or color field, it's also searchable naman. Then we also have the select tag. For the select tag, will be let's say in this form we want to have like a drop down of options. Like for example, sa Google form, diba? If you click on it, you have a lot of options. So let's put a select tag here, and let's say we want to have option tags we can pick. So similar to the input tags, we have to put a name. So for example, let's name this let's see, course. Like what course are you from? Diba? Then we have to put an option here. The value of this is, for example, BS MIS. This is what's going to be sent to the server. Then this is what's going to be shown on the user. Let's see, BS management. BS management. So if you can see, we have a drop down. BS MIS, BS management. And if you want to put a label, same thing. Let's put a label tag. And same as the ID here, we're going to put in the for course. Oh, I forgot to put, I keep forgetting. You have to put the text here inside the label tags, and it will pop out there. So that's how you create forms in HTML and select tags. Now for text area, there's also text area. Text area is for mga big descriptions. So its name is desk, which means descriptions. Actually, you don't have to put anything there. And it will create that. So you can type here description like, hello, I am Renzo, etc., etc. And this is where this is basically useful for mga long text, not just a single input. So you can also use that as well. And similar to other inputs, you can put a label here. Again, ID has to be the same, and put desk here, and put here description. There. Our forms look ugly, but as we get into CSS, we will know how to style this. So we can put our description here. If you submit, it's gonna submit, see here, name equals something, password equals something, course equals something. So this is what gets sent to the backend, which is kind of out of our scope for now. So we'll be discussing that in a future workshop. Now we have to understand what's the difference with block and inline. Block level elements always start on a new line. So for example, here in our, let's go to our index.html here. If we go here and we look at our heading and our paragraphs, if I inspect element and I hover, I click this and I hover over, that's the size of the element. So it's gonna take up the entire screen width, so that when you type your next element, it's gonna bounce to the next line. So as you can see, also paragraph is a block level element. If I go to A tags, it's not a block level element. It only, the size of it is only what the size of the content is. That's what you call inline elements. So inline elements does not start on the new line. It only takes up the width of its current content size. So examples of block level elements are headings, paragraph, tables, lists, divs. So as you can see, headings here, paragraphs, paragraphs. And if you can see the M here, the emphasis, the italicized, that is an inline. The strong tag is an inline. This is an inline, so on and so forth. And the table is a block, apparently. Lists are block, etc., etc. So why do I have to know this? Well, it's not really important for now, but later on when you get to start to style things, it's gonna like play a role there. just to let you know. So common HTML tags, more on divs naman. Divs are block level elements. So this is mainly used for separating the like dividing parts of your document. Like for example, in my index.html, I want to have a div here for the title and the introduction. So I can put a div there, and I can put tabs here to fix the format. So this is, for example, I want to divide this into like the introduction. Then I put a div here. This is for my social media links, so I can put that there. So as you can see, it kind of looks neater now compared to earlier. Then for the table, I want to have a div for that. This is gonna be like my friends list. I put this in another div. Then in this part, I want to put a to-do list. I put my unordered list there. And I have an auto formatter, which is neat. You can download in plugins also. But um, for this, as you can see, for divs, it's kind of useful for like dividing our HTML tags. So as you can see, what's the point of it? Nothing happens. Like, it looks exactly the same. This plays a role when if you're gonna start styling with your CSS already. Like for example, I want to style my introduction to have color blue background and like orange borders. And like for my table, I want it to be color red. So divs are good for like understanding how you can style and how you can separate your styles and how you can reuse your styles in CSS, which we'll discuss later on. But for now, just understand that divs are really important for dividing your documents into separate parts. Now for spans. Spans are similar to divs. It's good for separating parts in your document, but instead of being a block level element where it creates a new line, spans stay as is. Like for example, it doesn't create a new line. What I mean. Like for example, this hello world here. If I put a span here and there, and I look at hello world, nothing happens. It doesn't create a new line. But if I put a div, it creates a new line, which is not what I want. So this is what are spans used for. It's good for styling also, similar to divs. Good for styling like small parts in your document, like mostly text. Like if I put here style equals color blue. Again, you don't need to understand this for now. I'm just showing to you guys. See, I styled my span color blue, and those not part of the span are styled normally, no blue color. So I'll just undo my changes there. And there you go. That's how spans work. So for example, in this example, you have a paragraph. For example, the span we want to style it blue, it's going to style blue. The span is going to style green. For semantic HTML, now, we've been discussing like divs, like this is how you're going to divide parts in your document. Divs, divs, divs. But what if we have so many divs that we don't know what part is which? Like we have a div here, and another div there, another div there. What that's gonna happen is what's gonna happen there is it's gonna create a lot of like code that is very unreadable. So for us to like understand like where's the header, where's the nav bar, where's the footer, where's the sidebar. We want other coders like the people we're collaborating with to understand what part is which. So HTML5 brought like semantic HTML. This is useful for like again, as I said earlier, understanding your code better. So here we have header, footer, section, main, article, and nav. Again, you don't need to memorize this, but essentially what these are basically the same as div tags, except they are labeled. So I have one here. For example, as an introduction, instead of a div, I can put header. Then links, maybe you can put this in the sidebar, so you can put aside, aside. Then for the table, you want it to be a separate section, so we can put section. This is another section as well. Then this is another section. So we can divide our HTML into separate parts without needing to spam divs all over our code. This is for better readability. So there's header, which is like the first part of your site, the nav bar, which is like where you click all the links. The section is like a section of the page. An article is, as the name says it, an article. A side is like those for those sidebars, and footer is for footer. And if you can see here the difference, especially if you're gonna sub, like if you're gonna have sub divs within divs, you can have a div here, a div here, a div within a div, versus having article, then a header here, then a div, then another article, and a header and a div. So it's kind of makes the code more readable for viewers. So it kind of makes it easier to read, especially for screen readers, for yung mga blind people who rely on screen readers. They will be it's gonna be easier for them to know and understand which is which. Now, we're gonna discuss CSS syntax, but give me like around 2 minutes. I need water.
Can you stay here?
Okay. So CSS syntax. So this is gonna be the second half of our tutorial here. Now we discussed everything you need to know about HTML. As you can see, HTML is kind of easy to get going. There's just not much. There's like not much to get like to know about. Like there's label tags there. There's inputs. There's headers, paragraphs. Now CSS is a different story. There's really a lot of things to know about CSS. It's easy to get started with, but later on you're gonna experience difficulties with layouting and stuff like that. But I'll be here to help you, naman. So for our CSS, sorry about that. What's the syntax of CSS? So here we have selectors. This is where we're gonna put what's what elements do we want to style. And here we have property and value. Uh, how are we gonna style these elements? Do we want to change the color? Do we want to change the font? Do we want to change the size? That's where we're gonna put our styles. So there are three places to write our CSS. The first one being inline styles. Inline styles is basically putting it inside the element. So if I go here in my beautiful website about myself, if I go to hi, I am Renzo Tan, inside the H1, I put style. Let's say we want to put a color of let's pick a color here, aqua, yeah. It's gonna change the color of the text to aqua. What if we want to put a background? Let's say background color is red. Yes, there you go. It gives you a red background. Hurts my eyes. But besides the point, um, the style here, it's not a good practice. Why? Because if you're gonna put separate styles in each element, it's gonna create redundancy because you're not able to reuse your CSS styles. You're gonna have to put in separate tags. So for example, the paragraph tag, I have to put a style there. Then inside the span, I have to put another style. So what if out of all those styles, you have to redo your entire code? You have to keep deleting all the styles and redoing all the styles, which is not what you want. So that's how you put a style. But I'm gonna delete it because it's not good practice and no one ever does that unless if it's necessary. Now, internal styling. Internal styling is a bit better in practice, but not the best. It's what I did here. Style, for example, let's delete this. In the title, I put style, tags there. Then let's pick a selector. So again, as I discussed earlier, you have to put a selector. The selector is, let's pick the hi, I am Renzo Tan. H1, color equals aqua. And the background color is red. The same thing. Now, what if I want to also add it to um, all my paragraphs? So the p tags, I can just put here. Um, I forgot what you call this. Basta that symbol there, that symbol there, and then p, and it styles both of them. So it's easier to reuse your styles if you're gonna use classes or like selectors. Let's remove this. However, what if you have so much CSS that it's gonna flood your HTML file? We don't want that. So what we can do instead is, instead of this, let's comment this out. Comment. For you to comment, you can use Control slash. There, it's gonna comment already. Don't need to type the syntax. What we can do is create a file here called styles.css. And within our index, we're gonna put a link tag. And what the link tag does is it's gonna connect CSS or JavaScript files towards your HTML file. We can put here styles.css. And what that does is nothing because we don't have styles yet. So we can put h1 call again color equals aqua and background is no aquamarine na lang card. Doesn't look painful. It still looks painful. But as you can see, this is better practice so that we can separate our CSS styles uh, from our HTML file. So as you can see here, inline, worst practice, create redundancy, internal styling, not the best practice, only good when CSS is short. So if you only have like small lines of code of CSS, it's not bad naman to do internal. And external styling is best practice. Separate your CSS file from your HTML file. Oops. So for CSS IDs and classes, now the bad thing about having to use only the element tag, so for like h1 style color blue or paragraph style color red, is that it's gonna affect all the h1s and all the paragraphs. But what if we only want to style like two h1s or five paragraphs, something like that? What we can do is use something called a class tag. I mean a class attribute in our HTML file. So this is used for styling many elements at once. So it uses a dot as a selector. So let me show you an example. In our index, let's say um, within our unordered list, we want to put a class here of list dot dash item. Then we want to copy this class within all the lists. So wash laundry, laundry, there, and feed dog. Now we applied a class to all these lists. So what we can do now is style it. So what we can, to get the class and style it, we have to use the dot or period. Then the name of the class. Then we're gonna put the color. Let's say we want to style it to, I don't know what that color is. Let's just style it to, I don't know, green. There, then it's gonna style all of those as green. Then what if you also want to put it in one of the ordered lists? Like for example, you put a class of list item here. It's gonna style it there also. So it's better to it creates better fluidity, flexibility with styling our code rather than using selectors. Because if we use selectors, like if I just do li here, it's gonna style all of them at once, which is not what we want. So class names are very useful. Now for IDs, it's used for styling one unique element. Now, why do we have to use this? Why can't we just use something like style? Well, ID, first of all, it's within the CSS file, of course, which is better. And at the same time, we get to, it's kind of better practice in the industry as well because we don't want to use style tags. That is a very, very bad practice. So, for example, for IDs naman kasi, it's only for styling one. But for classes, it's styling many. So, for IDs, for example, I want to style this section here. Let's put an ID of to do. Then if I go here and I to get the to do ID, I use a hash symbol. So to do, let's give it a background of uh violet. I don't know, and it's gonna work. And one thing to note is we don't want to use IDs too much because as much as possible we want to reuse our CSS styles because like for example you have a lot of articles. We want to have an article class for each, then style each article with their class. Unlike if you use ID, it's only for one unique element. So it's as much as possible use classes para we get to restyle it more. Only use IDs if it's super, super, super unique to the point that it's impossible to have to reuse that same style. So this is part of the PowerPoint. Oh, by the way, the PowerPoint, I'll send it to you guys after this workshop. I'll be sending a GitHub link in your email, so don't worry about that. So CSS selectors, we already discussed this kinda. So to get a class name, we use dot. To get an element tag, we only use the name. So h1, h2, paragraph. IDs, we use ID name. Now we can also use combinators. Combinators are used for like getting child elements or sibling elements, or basically any kind of combination you can make with your CSS. So for example, let's get rid of these styles here. It's so ugly. Let's just comment it out. No, no, actually, let's not remove it. Or I guess get to see it back. Like for example, I want to get from the header, I want to get the paragraph. So how do I do that? So we want to tackle this paragraph here from the header. So what we can do is header greater than paragraph. And what the greater than means is that it's the direct child. So let's color this blue. Oops, where is it? See, it's gonna color the paragraph blue. And what if I want to tackle the span? The span here. What you can do is where's my code? Where's my VS code? Oh, it's here pala. Then we have header greater than p. We can also do greater than span. So you can also combine. This will also work, and it will only get the span. But what if you don't want to do the greater than p, greater than span? You can just do header span. Because here, if you use greater than, it's the direct child. So it has to be after talaga. The child after the parent. Parent descendant is basically any element that's inside the parent, style it. So that's how it works. You can also use descendant combinators. And the others you can just look that up in your own time. And we also have pseudo selectors, which is active, hover, visited, focus. What I use mostly here is hover. Now, how do I use that? For example, I want to style the these list items, and when I hover them, I want them to turn into color purple or something. For that, you can do dot list item color purple, and if I do color purple lang, if I do list item lang, it's gonna turn them purple immediately. But what if I only want it to turn purple when I hover over it? So what I can do is put here colon hover. And what that's gonna do, it's gonna turn them purple when you hover over them. So that's neat. Okay. Now that we discussed CSS selectors, let's discuss colors and typography. For colors, okay, this is where the real styling begins. This is just like the beginning. Now we have headings here. What if we want to style, give it a background? Like for example, um, let's get the header. Actually, let's put a ID here of header. Let's get the header using the hash symbol, and we're going to give it a background of let's give it um Peru, whatever that is. It's gonna style it Peru. That's for background color. It changes the color of the background. But if you want to change the color of the text, you can use color. Let's just name it white, and it's gonna turn white. Now, there are many ways you can use colors. You can use RGB, you can use built-in colors, which is what I'm doing, and you can also use hexadecimals. Now, what if I do RGB? So RGB, then if I hover over this, you can actually adjust it yourself. Oops. Hello. Anyway, let's just put random values. Let's put 234 here, 100 here, and let's say the blue is 170. It's gonna create its own colors. So there you go. You can also use hexadecimals. Actually, let's go to colorhunt.co. And if you go to color hunt, this is where you can pick different colors, different palettes, which are nice. And if I like click on this orange here and I copy it and I put a hash symbol there to say it's a hexadecimal, it's gonna pop out the color there. Now let's create a palette. Let's say we want actually let's not do this for now since we all have different colors in our color hunt. Let's say we want this color blue na lang. It looks ugly, but that's beyond the point anyway um of this workshop. We're trying to like understand theoretically muna how this stuff works. So typography, that's how you can change the font. So for example, in this header, we want the font family to be, let's say we wanted Arial. Arial, it's already here. Oops, there you go. It's gonna change the font to Arial. Now, as you can note here, you can add multiple styles as backup, multiple fonts. So here, Arial, if the Arial doesn't work, it's going to show the Helvetica. If the Helvetica doesn't work, it's going to show sans serif. So you have a lot of backup stuff there. And one thing to note about colors and font family is if you style it in a parent element, it's going to move down to the child elements. That's why you can see here the H1 is styled and the paragraph is styled. So it gets passed down also. Now we also have font size, font weight, and text align. So what if we want to have a font size? Font size, we can use pixels. That's the normal unit for static sizing in CSS. So we want 20 pixels. It's going to get bigger. And as you can see, the header container also gets bigger as the content increases in size because the header container is set to auto. I put 30 pixels. It's going to get even bigger. There you go. Now, what if I want to adjust the font weight? So font weight, what if I wanted to only have 300? Will it change? It doesn't change. 100, does it change? It doesn't change. Now, the built-in fonts, like I said, they don't have any font weight installed within them. So what we can do is we can go to Google Fonts. I'll teach you how to import fonts. So let's go to Google Fonts, and everyone's favorite font is Montserrat. There's so much hype with Montserrat. I always see Montserrat. So if we click on Montserrat, and let's say we want to have regular 400, select the style. Then we also want to have light, font weight of 300, select it, and font weight of 100. Now you can see here the link to it. So we can just copy this link and then paste it in our index.html here below the CSS. There you go. Then what we can do is copy this font family Montserrat sans serif, which is scroll down below, then put it in our CSS. Replace this font family. There you go. And font weight, let's say we want it to be 300. And there you go. It's in style Montserrat already. What if we want it to be a font weight of 100? it's gonna change to 100. So that's important to note. Also, you can add styles in your CSS. Now, there's also text align. What if you want to align this to the center or to the right? You can use text align. Center. It's gonna shift everything to the middle. If you want to text align right, you can do that as well. Text align right. But for now, let's just leave it at center. Oops. There you go. So that's your heading page. Two main tabs. Now, as you can see, when you use colors and fonts, it gets passed down to children. But take note that other styles in CSS, they don't get passed down to children. They're very parent specific. So it really depends what styles you're using. So we already discussed pixels. We discussed pixels. There's also percentage. You can use percentage. It's more dynamic. So for font size, it's relative to the parent font size. So if your parent is 16 pixels, if you do 200%, the size is going to be 32 pixels. For rem, it's relative to the root font size. So for example, the document is 16 pixels by default. If you do 2 rem, it's going to be 32 pixels. If you do 0.5 rem, it's going to be 8 pixels. But if you do M, it's kind of similar to percentage, except you use EM as your unit. So if I do, like for example, the font size, I want it to be 2 rem because our default is 16. So if I do 2 rem, it's gonna show 32 pixels. And there you go. This is already 32 pixels. What if I do 200%? It's the same thing. Same thing, 32 pixels because we're doing times 2 of the default font size. I mean the parent font size. So that's also something we can take note of. We can use percentages in our CSS units and rem and PM as well. Specificity. This kind of states only that when you use CSS styles, there's an order to it. So if I do an element tag versus a class tag, classes are more specific, so the classes will overwrite the element tags. And the IDs will overwrite the classes, and the inline styles will overwrite the IDs. So for example, I want to have, let's say this, um, let's say we have a class here, right? List item. What if I also have an ID here of red, and I style it red, color red? What's gonna win versus dot list item, which is gonna be color blue? Who's gonna win? Well, essentially, since IDs are more specific, then it's gonna turn red because ID is more specific. Now, what if I do here, I put a style of color green. So what's gonna win? The style's gonna win because it's more specific. Now take note, um, even if it will overwrite, but if the element that's gonna overwrite doesn't have anything to overwrite, like for example, if I do, like if I do list item has a background of black, then the red's gonna overwrite it, then the green's gonna overwrite it, but nothing's gonna overwrite the background, so it will still apply. So that's something to take note of. If I go to my browser here, the background's still gonna be black. So if there's nothing to overwrite, then both styles apply. All the styles will apply. But since we're overwriting the color here, it gets overwritten. That's why it changed color. So that's how specificity works. The more specific it is, the more it will prioritize it. So background styling, this is for styling your backgrounds. So for this, we have background image, background repeat, background position, background size, and for shorthand, we have background. Again, we don't need to memorize this. I'm just showing to you what you're given with CSS. So for example, instead of background blue, let's say we want to have this face as a background for some reason. I'm just showing it to you. I'm not saying that you should have your face in the background, but like, so background image is, first we're gonna put URL, and then we're gonna do face.jpg. And if you look at your live and look at that, the image of the background is now this guy's face. But you can see it's repeating. Why is it repeating? Because you can also set a property for that. If you can see the PowerPoint, there's also something called background repeat. So we don't want it to repeat. So we're gonna put background repeat is no repeat. So it doesn't repeat. There you go. But now it's a bit in because the image doesn't fill up the entire space. So how are we gonna do that? For that, we also have background size. So background size, what we can do is para it gets cropped out instead of like only using what's possible, like this width. We want it to like expand and crop out. You can use something called background cover, background size cover. There you go. You can see his hair there. Now, it looks okay, but why is it at the very top? I don't want it to be at the very top. What we can do is background, position, center, center. At the x-axis, I want it to be at the center. At the y-axis, I want it to be at the center as well. So there you go. It gets centered in the background. So that's kind of cool. Since you're allowed to like adjust your image background as well. So what if like there's so much attributes? Is there like one line I can do this? Yes, there's one line. Instead of doing all of this, I can do background URL face.jpg, no repeat. Oops, my bad. No repeat, center, center. And before the background size, you always have to put slash because that's good for separating it based on HTML rules. And as you can see, if I comment this out, the same styles apply. So you can actually just have one line of code to do it for you. So that's one thing to take note of also. So that is, sorry, my desktop's messy. That's how you use background styling. You can style what image will it repeat in the background. Position, where was it positioned? Do you want it to be at the center? Center, do you want it to be at the right top? Do you want it to be at the left bottom? Background size, if they want it to expand, they want it to be the same size. But primarily, I always use cover, like no matter what. And then background, you also have the shorthand for all these styles. Now the box model. The box model naman is for styling your margins, border padding, and content. For example, I want this, let's say I want this section here. Wait, no. Let's have this section here na lang, this to-do list. It has an ID of to-do, so let's get that. So the ID of to-do, let's say we wanted to have a background of uh, green, yellow, and then since we have our background set, what if we want to adjust the height and width? We can do that. So let's say we want to give it a height of 300 pixels, a width of, let's say, 60% of the screen width. So that's 60%. And there you go. It gives you a height and width. So this is going to be the size of the content. Now, what if we want to have a border? So what we can do, we can have a border here. Let's say we wanted to have, what color do you want? So we can do, let's say, color, let's just leave it at black. Then 1 pixel, like how big, how wide is the border? And then what kind of border? Do you want it solid? Do you want it dash? Let's say we want it solid. And there you can see it gives you a border. Let's make the border bigger, 3 pixels. And there it gives you the border. Now what if we want more space in between? As you can see, it looks squished. To give space between elements, we can use something called margin. Margin, then let's say we wanted to have 10 pixels. Let's give it more, let's say 40 pixels. It will give margins. So if I inspect element, As you can see, the margins, there's a margin in the top, there's a margin in the bottom, and the left, and at the right, because it's really big at the right because it's a block level element, so it takes up the entire space. So that's how you use margins. So as you can see here, we have the content, the height and width, the border, and the margin. The padding naman is if you want more space between the border and the content. So let's do that. Let's say padding to 20 pixels. It's going to expand it more. See, there's more space between the list and the border. Now, if you want it to only be at one side, there's also padding top. Instead of padding, you can use padding top. It's going to only increase it at the top part. There's also margin top, margin left, margin right, margin bottom, padding top, margin, padding right, so on and so forth. So instead of doing margin, you can also do margin left or something like that. And give it 30 pixels. Let's say margin top na lang. So as you can see, it gave more space at the top. Kasi if you use margin padding only, it's gonna go through all sides. But if you do margin top, margin left, margin right, margin bottom, it's gonna give more space, more specific to one side. So that's how the box model works. So the content, the padding, the border, the surrounding, the end of the element, and the margin. So as you can see, the height is set, height and width is the height and width of the content. Is it set to auto? How many pixels is it? And you can also use percent. If you use percent, it's gonna be the size of the parent element. So if the parent element is 300 pixels and you put 100% in the child's height, it's gonna be 300 pixels also in the child height. Padding is distance from content to border. Border is the edge of the element, and margin is the distance between current element and neighboring elements. So as you can see here, this has a width of 300 pixels, this text here. The padding is 50 pixels in all sides, so here, 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 and here. The border is 15 pixels size of solid green, and the margin is 20 pixels. So from here, 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 that's 20 pixels. So this is really good for layouting your elements. Now, since we don't have much time, position properties you can search at your own time. But I want to prioritize something called Flexbox. So Flexbox is really important for like on how to lay out your elements. Now let's create a new file here called flexbox.html. I'll teach you how Flexbox works. So over here, let's have a div here. Actually, let's call it section na lang para for semantics. Let's call this a div here, another div here, and another div here. Then instead of using a separate style, I'll just do style here since it's gonna be short lang. Let's say we have a class here called container. And we have classes here called child. Let's just copy paste. Then for each container, which is only one, I wanted to have a background of, let's say, chocolate or something. Then for each child, I wanted to have a background of cornflower blue. Then actually, it's different per child. So child 1, child 2, child 3. So this is for child 1. And for child 2, I wanted to have a background of dark blue. And for child 3, I wanted to have a color of let's say dark salmon, whatever. Then for each one, actually let's have another class here called child beside the child 1, child 2, child 3. And for every child, I want to have a width of 100 pixels and a height of 100 pixels. And for the container, I wanted to have a height of, let's say we wanted to have the entire screen. There's something called 100 VH, viewport heights, which is the size of your entire screen of your laptop or PC. Then the width is like let's say 100 WH, which is VW pala, which is the entire width of your screen. So if I open this in live server, there you go. You can see the boxes there. Now there's margins there because in browsers they have built-in margins. So for this, we can just remove the margins. So we can use the star sign, which is for every element, remove all the margins because we don't want any margins interrupting with our file. There you go. As you can see, we have 3 boxes here. Now, to make them more fluid, what we can do is, for example, actually, let's decrease the height to around 50 VH now, for it doesn't look too big. For the container, we can set it to display flex. We have to set the parent to flex. And what's going to happen is going to put them all beside each other. Now, so that we can adjust their positionings, what we can do is we can do something called justify content center. And there you go. Justify content aligns it from left to right. It's the main axis. So left, right, or in the other words, the x-axis. So we can also do flex start. It's going to go to the very start. Or flex end. It's going to go to the end. You can also do space around. This is useful for like spacing around each box. There you go. You can also do space between. It's going to occupy the entire width. There you go. Now, it's at the top. What if I wanted to go center? There's something called align items center. And there you go. And with the same thing with justify content, you can also do flex start, flex end, so on and so forth. So let's say we want it to be centered and spaced around so it looks neat. Now, what if we want it, for example, to go instead of being beside each other, we want to go on top of each other. We can do something called flex direction column. It's gonna put them on top of each other. Then the same things apply. Except justify content is now top and bottom, and align items is now left and right. So it got switched up. So there you go. You can do justify content center again. It's gonna center it in the y-axis, and so on and so forth. I already told you all the properties you can use with that. So that's how Flexbox works. You can center them as long as you have a container here that's a parent and you have child elements where you want to position. It's important that you want it to be child elements because what if, for example, you have a div here inside, tapos you put all of this here. It's not a direct child anymore because you have a div surrounding all the child elements. So what happens there is, for example, let's just put a style here. Oops. Um, Background is black. Um, Width is 300 pixels. Height is 300 pixels. This example, you don't need to do this. See, so here's the black thing. If we do justify content flex start, the entire thing is gonna move, not separately. If I do flex start here, the entire thing is gonna move. It's not gonna be per box. That's why we want it to be a direct child. Para for each child succeeding the parent, it's gonna affect each one, not just the entire thing, but each one. So that's how Flexbox works. Now we have media queries. Media queries is good for responsive design. So if you want to have tablets or mobile phones, you want to size it up, you want to change it up, then this is where it plays a role. So for example, let's go back to line item center, uh, justify content center. Then we want it to be For example, this is gonna be, let's remove the flex direction column na lang. So there you go, and then do a space around. One thing to note with the flex box is you can actually make them bounce to the bottom. Like if I do inspect element, if I size it down, it's not, nothing's happening. They're just gonna squish each other. That's not what we want. What if you want a box to go down or it fits? We can do flex wrap, wrap. And with that, if you inspect, it wraps. So responsive. Wow, it works. Now, what if we want to use media queries, as we said earlier? What if we don't want to use flex wrap? What we can do is we can go to our style here, and we can do a at then media. Then we're gonna put max width 600 pixels. There you go. And what this means is when the screen reaches at 600 pixels or below, do this. So for example, our container, we want to change it. Let's copy paste our container. We want the container to change to flex direction column. Note that whatever styles we apply here, these styles will still apply unless we overwrite them, similar to like specificity. So column. So now, right now I am at 1521 pixels. If I reach 600, see, it changes. And we can even change the background color of, for example, the container. We want to change the background to green. If you look at this, boom, it changes color when it goes to 600 pixels. That's the power of media queries. What if I do min width 600 pixels? So if it's greater than 600 pixels, then do this. So right now it's naka brown pa siya. If it goes 600, it changes. There you go. So the difference with min width and max width is if it's max width, it's less than or equal to the size of the screen. If it's min width, it's greater than or equal to the size of the screen. Now, since we only have 8 minutes left, I'm going to rush how to use CSS grid. So the parent properties here are grid template columns, grid template rows, grid template auto rows, and gap. And child properties are grid column and grid row. Note that this is more of an advanced concept. So if you're a beginner, don't be afraid to not know anything. But if you're an advanced HTML, I hope this is going to be helpful for you. So for example, we want to have this kind of grid. So for this, the parent element, we have to make, how are you gonna format this grid? So here we have grid template column. I wanted to have a fraction and a fraction. So one FR and one FR. So if we do three 1FRs, it's gonna be 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. If we have two 1FRs, it's gonna be 1/2, 1/2. So that's how it works. And then the rows, how many rows are there? So we want to have one row of 300 pixels here and one row of 300 pixels there. So again, just to reiterate, grid template column is to specify how many columns do we want. So we want to have one column of 1FR and another column of 1FR. Then the rows is 300 pixels here, 300 pixels there. So let's create that. Let's, why is there an error? Oops. Oh, okay, wait. Let me fix this now. Let's create a new file called grid.html. Then let's copy whatever HTML we made here. Here. And then for style, we want to have a dot container. Let's specify it to have a display of grid. Then we want to have, let's say we want to have two columns. So grid template row, grid template columns. Let's say we want to have 300 pixels of one column and 300 pixels of one column, then how many rows do you want? Let's say for rows, we want to have 300 pixels also and 300 pixels here. Now, if I go in live server, there's nothing yet. But if I hover, you can see here the grid. So you can see here, the top left is 300 pixels. There's two columns. One is 300 pixels column, 300 pixels. The row is 300 pixels and another 300 pixels. So how do we insert our child elements? So for example, the container, I wanted to have, actually, for the child, for each child, I wanted to have a width of 300 pixels. Actually, we don't really need to specify the width and height because the grid will automatically stretch it for you. So for child 1, I wanted to have a color of, let's copy the PowerPoint. Child 1, we wanted to have a color of red, background of red. Sorry, my bad. Child 2, we want to have a background of green. And child 3, we wanted to have a background of blue. And as you can see, it automatically stretches them out. So how do we assign it to look like this? So for red, we specify what columns do we take. Grid column 1 slash 2. So we get 1, 2. What row? We get 1, 2. So that specifies that we want to have this portion. For the green, what column do you want? 2, 3. 2, 3. For a grid row, we want to have the first row, the first line to the second line of the row. So 1, 2. So it specifies this area. For the blue, we want to have grid column 1 slash 3. So this is 1, 2, 3. So this entire spot. Now for grid row, we want that to have 2, 3. So 2, 3. So this specifies this entire thing. So for me to do that, I specify grid column. I want it to be at 1, 2. So 1, 2. Grid row, I want it to be at 1, 2. So 1, 2 also. Now for child, I want it to be at column 2, 3. So grid column 2, 3. For row, I have 1, 2. So grid row 1, 2. Now for blue, we wanted to go to all columns. So 1, 2, 3. So grid column 1, 3. Now for grid row, we have 2. So this 1, 2, 3, we want to go to 2 and 3. So 2 and 3. And there you go. We created what we wanted in our PowerPoint. Now what if we wanted this? So the red is 1, 2. So that is column 1, 2, and 1, 2. So it's the same spot. It's still there. What if you want the green to be here? So the column is 1, 2, the row is 2, 3. So column is 1, 2, row is 2, 3. Now the blue naman is column 2, 3, and row 1, 3. So column 2, 3, row 1, 3. And there you go. That's how you use CSS Grid. Now, what if you want to have some space in between? We can do that as well. Gap. How much space do you want? 30 pixels. There you go. Now, we can also use media queries so that we can change it up. So media, max width, 400, 600 pixels na lang. So we can get the code we got earlier, which is child is 1, 2, 1, 2. Child 2 is, now we get our child 2 and then change it up to 2, 3, 1, 2. And then replace the child 3 back to grid column 2, 1, 3, and grid row 2, 3. Now, if I do media query, if it reaches 600 pixels, watch, it changes. There you go. So that's good for responsive design, no? And it's already 6:30. Sadly, I wasn't able to finish all the PowerPoint slides, but since we were able to discuss all the basics naman from Flexbox to grid, box model, I hope you guys enjoyed this workshop and learned a lot. I'll be sending you guys the GitHub link through your emails after this. Wait, let me see you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed the workshop. I'm so sorry if medyo nalabuan kayo in some parts, but if ever you guys have more questions, feel free to ask me na lang. And yeah, so this is HTML and CSS. We learned a lot then today. Sorry if it's a bit rushed because I really crammed up a lot in 1 hour and 30 minutes. Pero yeah, do you guys have any more questions? Um, you guys have anything? Type in the chat if you're too shy. Do you recommend any extensions for HTML or CSS or in general? For extensions, if you mean like something like live server, yes, you can. I have something installed called Prettier. If you do Prettier, that's gonna format all your HTML CSS properly when you save. So that's something you should take note of also. Um, I guess that's it. So thank you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the workshop.